What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the Pixel Lab. Hope you're doing well today. I want to talk to you about this Apple perspective video that just came out recently. It has this really awesome moment where all of these different pieces of paint on these columns and pillars line up perfectly to create some text. And I wanted to see if I could do that in Cinema. So I've just been kind of screwing around for the past hour just to see if I could come up with something. And let me show you a sample really quick of what I came up with. So it's really just a proof of concept to see how you would go about doing this. And I have this nagging suspicion that I might be doing something the hard way, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how I did it real quick, and then maybe some of you can point me to a better way to do it. I'm not super familiar with projection mapping. I haven't done a ton of it, so maybe I'm missing something simple, but let me walk you through it, and maybe some of you guys can help me out. So here's what I did. The first thought, of course, is to project the texture onto your environment. So I have this texture made in Photoshop with an alpha, just some text, and I made a quick room, and then we're going to go ahead and take the text and drop it onto that room. So the first thing we're going to do is put in a new camera, and then on this texture tag, let's change the projection to camera mapping, and then what we can do is drag that camera into the camera slot. Now you can think of this camera as a projector, just projecting this texture against whatever is in front of it like a projector would. So if we take this camera and turn it on and we kind of move it around, you can see that the text is stuck, but if we go off of this camera and move it, you can see that the texture is sort of just stuck on the environment, right? So now we can just move this camera around to put the texture where we want it. So what we can do is find our camera and just move it around a little bit. And let's just project this text where we want it. Now you can see it's tiling all crazy. We're gonna go ahead and go to our tag and let's turn off tiling, and that'll help us out here. All right, so the first step is just to set up the main chunk of text where you want it. So we're gonna set it something like this. All right, so that looks pretty good. We might want to rotate it a little bit. So play around with the rotation so it's sort of straight on, move it back to the center. So anyway, something like that. Let's go ahead and zero that out. So this is looking pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to do is, let's check out this video again really quick. You can see that there's items in the foreground right here, this pillar, that have text on them. So I went ahead and threw in a couple pillars really quick. All right, let's concentrate on this pillar. So here's the problem. If we take this texture tag and duplicate it and put it on here, it's stuck on there, but once we get to that ending point, it does not look right at all. So right now I want to remind you that all these pieces are going to line up at one specific spot. So before you do anything, you should plan out your camera move. So let's go ahead and put in a new camera, and this will be the actual camera that we use to do our animation. And let's go ahead and make a keyframe at the end and kind of set up exactly where we want our ending spot to be. So that's very important, and put a keyframe. And now comes the tedious part. We go to that pillar tag or that pillar camera, and we basically just mess around with those guys until it lines up perfectly. So I'm just going to jump into my final test here, and I'm going to show you it all lined up just because it took a little bit of time. I can show you exactly what I did. I basically took this tag and I played around with the offset of it, and I played around with the length of it and all that kind of stuff. And then I also went to that camera too, and I played around with the focal length, and I kind of moved that around, the sensor size, and I moved around the coordinates too. So basically it's just a matter of moving all these parameters until it lines up perfectly. And the problem is it's pretty tedious and it takes a little while. I got it to match up fairly well. There's a couple of times I was playing around and it took forever to line everything up just because the focal length and the positioning, everything has to be perfect. And you can see that the things in the foreground are going to be a different Z depth than the stuff in the background, so they're not going to have that skew. So it's definitely a little bit challenging to get it to line up perfectly. So if you have any input or advice on how to do this better, please let me know. I would love to find a better way. But anyway, here's the other cube. So I basically threw the exact same tag on there and then just kind of futzed around with this texture until it lined up perfectly. And then the final thing, if you look at this example, you can see that the G is not on the back wall as well. It's only on the foreground spot so that they line up perfectly in the end. Well, right now we have the R on the back wall and on the front pillar, so it's a little bit strange. So what I did was I just went into Photoshop and I took that last spot, and I noticed that the R is on the foreground and half of the W and the I is on the foreground. So I just went into Photoshop and I just cut out the R and half of the W, and then I loaded a new texture Just duplicated that one, load up the new texture. So we'll just load that in, drop that in the alpha slot as well, and then we'll go ahead and put that on the back wall. And then when we go over here, you can see that there's no R and there's no half of that W. So then it lines up perfectly at the end and it looks a lot better. So anyway, that's it. Just kind of messing around a little bit. I hope you guys have some input on a better way to do this. But this is the first way that I kind of tried out. It seemed to work okay, but it's a little bit tedious. So maybe you guys have a better way. Maybe I'm missing something simple. It'd be awesome if you could post that in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for checking out the Pixel Lab, and we'll see you next time.